Team, this is Jeff Cheel. I am the product strategist for Episerver for the Personalization Suite and our Marketing Automation Suite. And we're going through a little information today. I have along with me Chris Sharp. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Hi, thanks. This is Chris Sharp. I'm a solution architect. I'm going to be running through the demo portion of this.
Thanks a lot, Chris. And for the content today that we're going to be going through, we're going to do a quick overview of Episerver's personalization capabilities, not only the ones that are out of the box, but our add-on suite and the tools that we provide to help bring some additional value to you. And part of that add-on suite is going to be a little explanation of our product Advanced for content recommendations and Insight for journey, for visitor journey analysis. Then at the end, we will take those questions. And so I think to start us off, especially understanding the relationship between Episerver and Adage, we're trying to understand personalization and how to bring the best value. And we do a lot of workshops and talk to a lot of customers directly about what can be done from a personalization perspective and how to drive that additional value. And we start by doing some definitions. And a key term to understand and a key differentiator is understanding the difference between demographic data and behavioral data. And this gets us starting the conversation to help drive your company and your marketing presence where you'd like to go, which is to start to be predictive, to start to understand not only who your customer is, but what they like to do and how they like to interact with your site and who he or she wants to gather from a content perspective. And so really from this, we start to understand that demographic data is establishing why and what in order to personalize, and behavioral data is used to establish when and where when we start talking about personalization. With that, we can start to understand a little bit of the characteristics. Demographic data, in many cases, are the X's and O's. They're the donor and member level. They're the gender of the user that you're reaching. They're the age and the location. In many cases, this is the information that you're storing within your CRM, your testature system, the things that you're collecting through progressive profiling or asking your customer. But then there's this whole other section that becomes the behavioral side, which is understanding what they're doing, how they're interacting with the site, and starting to touch them across those touch points. And really, from a marketing perspective, it becomes important to understand how we can help drive people down the funnel by understanding, reacting to the things that they're doing, not just who they are, to help inch them along or push them and show that I am paying attention to that user and I am trying to bring additional value. Now, really, from the demographic perspective, we are establishing a persona and a content strategy. It is very key, and those shouldn't be overlooked. The value that we can bring by understanding users' location, what we can do from knowing their member level, their donor status, in order to give them initial feedback or immediate feedback is very important, especially when it comes to creating that content. There's certain pieces that should be shown to higher member levels because of the status that they've reached, and so on. But then, of course, on the other side, there's a very important context strategy when it comes to behavioral, that is the sequence that we're trying to drive users in order to lead them to a successful customer journey. And with all the tools that we talk about today, we're going to talk about the aspects of the behavioral, the ways that we can start to shape these tools in order to drive that. Now, if we talk about using behavioral data to personalize the web experience, we can start looking at the different kind of journeys that a user might go through. And of course, a main one that resonates with all of us are going to be a join journey. You call this anything you want to within your organization. But the truth is, this is a user who might have searched a term on the internet and found your site. It might be the Christmas Carol coming up for the holiday season, or looking for a performance. They find that term and that drives them to the site. And this could even be a term that you've purchased as a Google AdWord or something that from an SEO perspective is driving people to your site, but that's how they're finding your content. Now through that, they might visit your homepage. Maybe that drives them to the homepage. And with that, we now know as part of that journey, we should drive specific content when they come to that homepage. We should start to see certain pieces. And once they visit that homepage and sign up maybe for your newsletter, they'd like to get that email and they open that welcome email, and they're part of your contact funnel. They're part of that communication funnel. Now, with that, they might then go like your Facebook page and continue down the social media path. They might then follow up and purchase tickets for the performance that they've been involved with. They might then open that email event confirmation, and then they might subscribe to your site and become more active on the site when they join as a donor or really become a member. Now, all of those are steps during that join journey. They all have different touch points and different aspects to your business. Some of this goes into social, mobile strategy, and so on, but it's definitely a part of that process. Now, another process might be the renew journey, might be trying to get those different users who are already active members of the site who are coming back. And with that, they might take a different path. Maybe they're searching for a particular video at a time. Maybe they view that content on the site. And then through that content experience, maybe they open their monthly newsletter. Maybe they view a particular event in the future that they'd like to sign up for. They open that event confirmation, and then they renew. So these are all paths that we're trying to drive users down. If we take a look a little more deeply at this join journey, we can start to understand the tactics as part of this tool set that really help you. Like, for example, as part of that join journey, we might show content to unknown users who are referring to your Google search. So maybe because they came to see events for A Christmas Carol, we can create a visitor group that keys in on those target words, and we can show a call to action for that particular event. So now we're using dynamic content or dynamic landing pages on that home page to know that a user has searched for that term, and now they're coming in and we'd like to drive them in that direction. Another case might be with the emails that they're getting. Maybe we trigger a second email down the line when the first one hasn't been opened in a period of time. We know signing up for tickets is a very timely experience. And so if the first one got lost in the mail or didn't reach them at the right time, we want to keep posting them. And so we would use aspects of your marketing automation system in order to keep them engaged over a period of time. And that email might have specific content about that event that they looked at. It might have some dynamic content we'd like to show, driving them to that conversion, as it may be. Once they purchase that ticket, maybe showing them or sending them some information, a video, a promotion for that particular event. If we cross-promote some additional events that are coming up as part of the holiday season, but we're using the content on our site by sending them links to get them back into the site and keep them engaged. And if the KPI is really engagement time and time sort of clicks per session, this helps just drive more interaction with the website. And then finally, that email that they're getting for confirmation, maybe that personalized event or personalized page for their confirmation email as part of that join journey might be necessary. So we really want to understand when they reach that content, how is that important to them, and how does that start to engage? So now that we've taken a look at this kind of broad set of that join journey, let's start to go through the tactics and the tools that are used to execute that and start to understand. And a big part of this is going to be the built-in aspect in the CMS called visitor groups. Now, a lot of you might already know about this feature, but we're going to talk about it in context to help drive that behavioral journey rather than just the demographic journey we've seen before. Now, the tool is based on creating rules-based groups. So it's audience segments based on some criteria that we can put together. And Chris is going to go through how to create those groups, what you can do with them, and maybe how you can take and expand on them. Now, once those groups are created, then each page down to the individual block and individual text can be customized for a user that falls within that certain group. So for example, very easy example is, if I'm from California, I can follow that user throughout the site, and then anywhere, any page or any piece of content that I'd like to customize for users from California, I could do so. And in this particular case, if I came in from Google looking for a Christmas Carol, I could create or show a call to action for a Christmas Carol event coming up. And then I could even rule that person out once they've added or signed up or confirmed to go to the event. So there are ways in order to bring people into that criteria and then take them out depending on what they do and how they interact. Now, I think some advanced uses for visitor groups start to get above and beyond just knowing somebody's name and be able to put them in the same category. I think we've talked about this a few times in using keywords from websites or from Google search in order to drive different groups. And we thought this could be any term or any item that you typically see users come into your site from. Maybe these are purchased AdWords that you're using on Google. Maybe these are just common terms that you see people coming to the site with. But the aspect of the tool is we can identify the URL that drives the user into the site. In many cases, those contain the search criteria that are used to reach your particular site. And then in that case, you can utilize that. So that might be fall events or art and culture or Christmas Carol. But then you start to ask yourself, how is our experience going to be unique depending on how users came to the site? Now, with that same execution and that same thought, we can start to think about the marketing campaigns that we create. So if you're driving a marketing campaign for summer outings or different seasonal events, well, I know that users are coming to the site from a particular marketing campaign, so I should not only create a really dynamic landing page or a central location where my users are coming to, but I should also follow them around the site with that particular messaging if they're part of that experience. We should make it unique. So in that case, it might be users who visited this marketing landing page because that's where we're driving people through the email. And then we should be able to identify that with either the call to action or the messaging or the items that we're promoting as we go along if we're promoting specific events in certain places. And then finally, I think something that definitely gets overlooked outside of the B2B market, but is definitely something that can be really important to you is the idea of using scoring or numbered metrics in order to stratify somebody about how deep their interest is in certain pieces. And we often see this as ways to identify premium users as opposed to primary users, or in some cases, a user has shown a high affinity to sign up for an event. What we can do is certain actions going through the site, like visiting a category or visiting a specific landing page, can give a user a numeric value. And as that numeric value goes up, if they hit a threshold, they become part of a visitor group. So it's not just binary anymore. It's not just I visited a page and whether I did it accidentally, whether I did it on purpose, doesn't matter. The score is what's most important. And so giving somebody, I visited an event page, I looked at the calendar of events, I visited X, Y, and Z, that put me into a category knowing I'm probably pretty, set on booking tickets for an event. And with that, maybe then I ramp up the call to actions or the drive to get somebody to that conversion page. And so I think if we start to understand that, maybe a user is more interested in musical performances, maybe then we start to show, and if they've done a certain set of criteria, we can do that. And so within visitor groups, we can set that up by numbered criteria. All right, so going above and beyond the visitor groups and the aspects with that in our application, let's start to go into the machine learning and the more advanced tools that can really help you. And ironically, the first tool we're going to touch is our tool Advanced. Advanced is set up to do content recommendations for your users. And what we're trying to do here is really understand a problem that you have, which is that, in marketers, it's find it very difficult to understand and optimize each stage of that customer journey. And in fact, if you looked at that customer journey we just talked about, you probably say to yourself, well, sometimes I don't know what they go to next. Sometimes I don't quite understand the path that they take. Well, in this case, we're actually trying to give you a tool to help you and help use machine learning to help identify and piece together which content will drive conversions. And in doing so, it's really, or even lower bounce rates on your site. And in this case, sometimes it's just knowing what to suggest or driving people to the right piece of content that takes them down that path. And with that, we have Advanced, our content recommendations piece. And what it does is it utilizes data about your visitor's journey in order to identify and analyze goals within the site. So understanding how people are moving through to reach a common goal. And that goal could be for you a sign-up page, it could be a registration page, etc. It's looking at that goal and saying, here are the 5 steps that a typical user takes to go through. Then what we do is, based on where we're showing a user content, the home page, an event page, or so on, where you're using this block, we can then show them a related piece of content or some other step in the process to get them to that stage. And you don't need to guess that, you need to pick that. The system's looking at that for you. It's amalgamating that data together. Now, from a technical perspective, what it's doing is it's collecting data about your users as they visit the site. They're storing it in what we call our profile store. Now, the tool eventually will be kind of assigned to be able to take in external sources of data. So it could be mobile applications or other sources of information to pull that into the profile store to create a full system of data. It's then comparing that to our content service, which is the service that is used to create pages and blocks and other pieces of content on the site. It's analyzing that as part of the personalization engine and finding correlations between those two pieces, the actions that people take compared to the content service. And now it's going to say, based on the content pieces that we see, use that content recommendation back on the site to suggest articles, page links, and other pieces for your users. Now, on the author and admin side, we can really start to take advantage of that data that we see. We can start to either get suggestions on blocks and pieces to use when we create pages. We can get analytics, and we'll show you a little bit about what that dashboard looks like to understand piece by piece what is helping with conversion, what is helping us reach that goals, what are the pieces that are best suited to help drive conversion. And then finally, help you make decisions, and whether that's automated decisions that are doing for you or just going through a decision tree and analytics and understanding. And the path for this product down the road is to really help open up the black box of personalization to help you better understand. And really with that individualized content sequencing, this is the goal of the product, to understand this path that users are taking down in order to really make that conversion and understand what is the next viable source. Now, of course, right now with the product, we're only on site. We're trying to drive people in on site. We understand that sometimes it is off site, moving to social media and other spaces, but in our case, we really are going to nail down that on site path in order to drive people to that call to action. And finally, the last tool we're going to show you today, and Chris will go into this here too, is to take a look or find a tool that can access that visitor insight in even a more in-depth way. So what if we could actually break down those user journeys that we're collecting? What if we could actually view them, see them, understand where they're coming from and who that user is in order to give us even more insight about our users? And with that, we talk about Episerver Insight. Now, Insight is really trying to use to understand those visitors and their journeys. The tool is a reporting tool that now takes user journeys, propagates them into profiles, allows you to then view those profiles to now enrich and understand your users better. Now, in each profile page, and Chris will show you this, the goals here are to collect user level data, aggregate those into a persona level that can be segmented, so we can create segments from this data. We can identify a particular user's journey, so we can look at somebody who bought a ticket for a particular event, see that the journey that they took, so we can understand it even more, give you that really deep insight. And we can visualize that relevant data, so in a way to try to show that data to you in either a dashboard like you see here, or push this out to a reporting tool like SiteSense, where you can aggregate that together and start to understand your users at a higher level. And then we can take action, and with this tool, the biggest portion here is actually being able to create segments to be used back on your user set. Now let's take a quick look at what one of those segments looks like. So from an execution standpoint, we can manage our users' profile. We can look at them page by page. We can start to filter users by profile attributes. So maybe I'd like to create a segment of users who I know by email, who have visited within the last year, who are from a specific country. And maybe I can name that segment that I create UK male visitors. So maybe it's by state or it's by attribute and so on. And that segment can be exported to other Episerver products, especially a visitor group. So I can now use this to create a more dynamic visitor group. And the difference here is that we're using criteria that are collected within Insight to create those visitor groups rather than the rules base that we created before. So these are things that we're finding about common users who've converted. We can now segment those, find the attributes that are most important. We can help to drive those. Now, I think two big important things to understand about Insight is that we can import external data into the application. We can work with Adage in order to bring in CRM data, for example, and enrich Insight with even more data to help with visualization and segmentation. So that's a big step that we can do, and all the tools are there to do so. And we can also export that data. So we can take that data out, we can push it to a platform like SiteSense for visualization. We have some built-in visualization that we're working on as part of the tool, but in the end, if you have a general reporting dashboard to understand all the different senses of your touch points of your organization, getting this on-site data is going to be even more important. And the value here is not only giving you users, but giving you the events that they go through. So who clicked on what, who went to which page, be able to create a volume about that and create that nice, rich visualization down the road. All right, everybody, with that, enough PowerPoints. Let's get into demonstrating the products and show you them in action. And Chris and I are going to go a little back and forth to sort of talking and showing you some context to what we just saw to enact the product. So Chris, let me make you present it really quick, and I'll let you take the reins.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, hopefully you guys are able to see my screen.
We
So I'm going to
can.
show you, we're going to run through the demo portion. I'm going to break this down into a couple different sections. First, I want to go over a couple scenarios that we think that would be pretty relevant to the types of users that are coming to your site. And then we'll switch gears and talk about how we created those scenarios, what tools we used in order to build up that experience. So for our scenarios, I want to show you this performing arts center called Mosey Theater. It's a local theater in my region. Now, when a user comes to the site for the first time, we don't really know anything about them. So we can't really do a whole lot of personalization. We can show them, the performances that are upcoming. So if we go into the tickets events, we can see upcoming events. But from here, we're not really showing them any relevant content because we don't really know anything about them. But that's not necessarily the case. We actually do know things about them. So we know if they came in from a particular landing page. We know if they came in through a particular search query or whatnot. And we also know their geographic location based off of IP address. So we can start doing some type of personalization to show them some relevant content, even though we don't know anything about their behaviors. We don't know about what they're interested in or what their past purchase history looks like. So let's take a look at that first example. So someone who is coming in from an outside geographic location, we might be able to show some other types of content that is more pertaining to them. So we might say, hey, we see that you're from an area outside of our region. We now have a weekend package available. And that weekend package might include a dinner, a performance in a hotel. It's just one way that we can take our standard performance ticket sales and upgrade them to a much larger package. So this is one way that we can start doing some type of relevant information, start showing some personalized content that's specific to that one user. Another way is based off of that Google search results. So say that we have a Google search results page just like this. This is probably something that a lot of you are familiar with. And we search for a Christmas Carol play. And our first result is for Mosey Theater. So clicking through to Mosey Theater now gives us a different banner. We can now take that term that they search for and have that drive the types of content that is being returned to the user. Even if we click into that Christmas Carol, we actually might be able to show some more relevant content. So now we know that they searched for a specific term. We showed them some personalized content, and we started learning the actual behavior of what they're doing on their site. We know that they're interested in this holiday theme event. So now we can start showing them some more recommended content based off of the behavior of this person and of similar people. So we might show them recommended events, other performances, or other events that's happening with the theater. We can take this one step even further when someone is identified as themselves. So let's say I were to log in as Jack, Mr. Jack Rubin. Whenever Jack sees the home page, we'll get actual recommendations based off of his recent purchase history. So based off of what performances he purchased in the past, here are some upcoming events that we think that he'll enjoy at Mosey Theater. So using these tools, using the segmented-based visitor groups to drive personalized content, just like our geographic location and our search queries, but then also using our new tools, the Episerver Advanced, to show recommendations based off of behavior and viewing history, we can really start showing some content that is much more relevant to our users.
To your point, Chris, and I just wanted to jump in. I think the biggest hole that I think a lot of customers that we talk to are missing is a strategy for those anonymous users. And I bet if we polled the audience the people on the phone. I bet over 50% of their audience that comes to the site is anonymous. And with that, there's no content strategy, no piece in place in order to give a more relevant experience there. And so I think the tactics today are really important. I think, what Chris is showing right now and what we can do with a known user is very impressive. And that's obviously what your site should do. That's what people expect. But I think those unknown users and the little tickets and the little trinkets that we can pick from them really drive that value and start to show that your site is focused on content, is focused on experience, and really drives that home. So, if you walk away from one thing today, ask yourself, do we really have a strong message? Do we have a strong tactic when it comes to anonymous users? And what can Episerver do to help us bring that? Even if that is modifying and creating some of these additional visitor groups, I think that's going to be a big win for you.
Perfect. So let's actually look and see how some of this was built out. So I'm going to go into the Episerver CMS editor experience, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this screen. The first thing we can look at is visitor groups. So in our top navigation, we have a section in here for visitor groups. Now, out of the box visitor groups, we actually have a lot of criteria that allows us to really create a personalized a set of users based off of some information that we know about them. So, for example, if they're from an outside of our geographic location, we might be able to say, hey, let's drag in a geographic location here, and we can drill down into an actual region in order to actually set up where this location should be. We can turn this around. If you want to reverse this, we can actually use other visitor groups as criteria as well. So maybe if you want to say they're not part of a member group, then they would see a different set of content. Now, with Episerver, we have a set of criteria we have a large set of criteria that allows you to do a lot of these things. So if you want to look at things like if they visit a page for the first time, if they first-time visitors on the whole website, or if they're coming from a certain operating system, or if they're authenticated users or whatnot, or if they're coming from a geographic location at a certain time of the day, or probably more importantly, the query string. If you're looking at maybe a UTM campaign, if you're actually looking at the query strings that are in the URL. Using these out-of-the-box criteria just gives us a whole lot of possibilities about how we can start showing a more personalized experience, a more relevant experience to our users. And then as our Episerver site grows, we actually get more criteria along the way. So Episerver Forms comes with its own set of criteria, so you can actually see if someone maybe has filled out a newsletter sign-up form. Episerver Insight, which we're going to talk about very shortly, also gives us some criteria, so you can actually look into to see if someone is part of an Insight segment. And then additional criteria can be created as well. So if you want to connect to an outside CRM system, we can create criteria that looks at that particular system to help drive those experiences as well. And then using these back in our editor experience, all that really involves is going into a block and just personalizing it. So on this actual content area here, I've personalized an area to see different visitors would see different heroes based off of their visitor group. And as an editor, if I want to see what those visitors would see, I have a view setting that allows me to actually see, people who search for a Christmas carol would see this banner, and people who are outside my region would see that weekender package as we showed before. So this is the first way of doing personalization. It's rules-based, segmented-based, based off of information that we know, based off that underlying criteria. Where it gets a lot more interesting is these other tools that we are now offering. So Episerver Advanced and Episerver Insight that gives us a way to do personalization based more off of the behavior of a user. Now, Episerver Advanced, essentially what it does is as a user is going through and clicking on events, we're tracking all that data and we're sending it out to our personalization engine. And with that, it stores all that data away. There's some machine learning algorithms that goes along with it, and it allows us to pull back recommendations based off those underlying machine learning algorithms. So some of those algorithms might be, people who search for this event also clicked on this event. And the way that we're doing that is we're looking at the data tagging and the data attribution behind those events. So for example, in our example where we go into the Christmas Carol, if we were to go and search for the Christmas Carol and go back into this page, these recommended events are looking at the tagging such as holiday events, performances, but it's also looking at people who clicked on this also viewed that. Now what we're doing is we're going to give you tools in order to see what is happening with your users. So I want to show one screen real quick that is a beta of a portal that we're building out. And this portal really kind of shows us how the performance of these advanced recommendations are working with the content that's being returned. So we can see the number of content views that's coming from our recommendations, our bounce rates, our KPI conversions, and we can really kind of drill down into all these different reporting mechanisms. But furthermore, we can look into things like the content analysis, where we can see how people are coming to the site and landing on a page and then how they're exiting. And we think that providing these tools will really give you a great insight into to seeing how the users are interacting with your website. Now, speaking of insight, I want to show you another screen. So as we're going through and we're tracking everything that the users are doing, we can actually see all those events happening in one individual screen. Now, when you go into Insight for the first time, you're going to see a screen very similar to this. So you're going to see someone who has logged in. We logged in as Jack Rubin before. But we also see a whole lot of unknowns, and that's because a user is not identified. These are all anonymous users that's coming to your site. But we can still go in and we can see these anonymous users. We can see what they're clicking on and what they're doing. The more important thing here is, though, whenever an anonymous user becomes identified, we can take that profile data and attribute it to an actual identified user. So we're not losing any information about a user who eventually becomes identified on your site. If we drill into Jack Rubin's profile data, now obviously since Jack is a fairly new user here, we don't have a whole lot of information here, but we can start gathering information about them as time goes along. I actually have another profile here that gives us some more details about another user, John Smith, who has done some other events. So he clicked through a marketing automation campaign. He maybe submitted some orders. We can also see the session summary, see how long he was on the site. We can see all things like the images he's looked at. We can see which different blocks he looked at and how he interacted with those blocks, in order to give us this type of deep knowledge into this user and their behaviors. Now from here, we can take this profile information and create segments out of them. So let's say that we always want to see, say we have someone who has been identified via email, and we've seen them within the last 24 hours in the same country. What we can do is take this and save it as a segment. And when we save this as a segment, we can make this available in visitor groups. So I actually already created one for this purpose. And if we go back to our visitor groups, I have one called Member of Insight segment. And what this is doing is it's looking at our Insight segments of our recently purchased constituents. So what we're doing is we're looking at the events and actions of the users who have recently purchased a ticket or a past an event, and we're segmenting them out. We're putting them into a bucket of users, and now we're able to use that behavior to drive more relevant, personalized content back on our website.
Yeah, Chris, can you go back to Insight for 1 second? I think I want to make a point here that there are a few things that we can do within Insight, especially within the profile, that especially when it comes back to tying to your CRM. One easy thing that we can do is import CRM information into this application to provide more enriched profiles. So if we're looking at Jack Rubin, or if we're looking at a user and we understand membership level or other attributes, that data can be ported in and we can build that. So when we're creating these segments, those would then be extra filters that we can use in order to continue down. So you don't have to compile that data within Episerver when we're building the visitor groups. You can do it within Insight, where you have all these profiles together, ready and waiting. That's one really important thing to do. Other thing you can do is, if we work with Adage, if we work with the application, we can actually record the events that are happening on other platforms and record them into here. So imagine you wanted to record the action of signing up for an event. And since that didn't happen on your website, it happened through Testatura, that was an external event. Well, in that case, we still could register to that event. That would be an additional event that would then show up in the profile, so you don't have to worry about grabbing all that ticket information, porting it over to here. That would just be an additional event that we registered to you for users. So these all become more important things to be able to grab kind of a complete cycle for users to be able to create these profiles. So Insight is really about the data that you push into it and the kind of the touch points that you have. And part of utilizing this tool is sitting down as you're using it or as you're starting to use it to really ask yourself what's important and what would be the best source of data that we could have within this application to then use across those other applications. One other thing that I'll point out to before I hand it back to Chris, the segments that we create in here, while they are actionable on other applications within the Episerver portfolio, they are exportable. So we could pull a list of users. If they're all known, we could create a CSV out of that list, and then you could pass it to your marketing automation solution. So, or you could pass it to your social media platform if you're doing social outreach, if you have their social media contacts. So these lists and these segments, I think the easy integration is to push them to other Episerver applications, but there is a use to take them out and use them externally within your ecosystem. So definitely keep that in mind.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. So at this point, I'd be definitely welcome to take any questions if you guys have any. There's the questions box in the GoToWebinar section. Feel free to throw some questions out there, and we can take them as necessary.
And great. And while you guys are thinking of those questions and formatting, Chris, can you go back to the website that we saw before the Mozy event site? I think if you're looking for some easy takeaways here, especially in the products that we saw, this recommended events unit that you see at the bottom of your page, I bet all of you out there probably go through that process of having to curate that list of events weekly, monthly. You have to go through and ask, like, what are the most important you have to do. One easy tactic to really match up the machine and the man or the person or the content creator is to really empower this list of units dynamically. And why not let something like Advanced drive that? If that's something, it's a tactic that you're using all throughout the site, trying to get people to sign up for more events, utilize a machine learning tool like Advanced, as those are recommendations that we can send off to you. And if it is just a link to a page or a piece of content, or down the road when we start to do videos and other pieces as part of this tool, all that curation can be done away with because you're letting the machine use it. And especially the criteria that we can use, and maybe we didn't get into this as much, but we can really utilize criteria like most popular events for users who've looked at a particular category. So it's not just most popular across the whole site. We could focus on users who think of the most popular musicals, or the most popular family events, or the most popular baking events, and so on. So there are some really good options there for you. All right, a question that we had from the panel is, do you have an easy option for cart abandon? Absolutely. So I think utilizing the opportunity to capture a user who puts an item into an abandonment and then goes away, that can become an event within Insight. So we can capture that abandoned event as part of your system. So it's a registered event. It becomes a tick within our system to know abandonment. And then when the user either comes back or you communicate with them through marketing automation and they come back to the site, we can put them down another path, even if that's getting a list of the events that they saw before and understanding. So part of that is understanding our communication method. We really think email would be the way to communicate with them, and then whether that's driving them through email to a new landing page or giving them a suggestion to a particular event, at the least, we put them into a new visitor group that is interested user who didn't convert. And now it becomes something where we know that they're interested, but just trying to find the right event, and then we can modify our content strategy to really drive them. So it's above and beyond just an email showing, hey, you abandoned this, come back. It could be a more advanced or kind of long tail content strategy to help keep them involved because we know they've reached some kind of criteria. Again, in the end, these are all just kind of ticks or methods or noise that we use throughout the purchasing cycle to get people in the proper space. They're just identifiers. And the tools that we have are really a registration tool against an event that then allows us to classify people, and then a personalization system that can drive people who fit within that new criteria. So even if it is, people who signed up last year, I signed up last year and I can get that sign up information. I know who came to last year's dinner with Santa. Well, then I can send them an email and ask them to sign up again. I can also put them in that new visitor group. A question we get all the time about visitor groups is, what's the maximum or ideal number of visitor groups to create? How do I stay away from creating 500 visitor groups that go? And I put those into a few different categories. I put them into long-standing visitor groups and kind of consistent visitor groups. And then I put them into tactical visitor groups. Just because you create a visitor group doesn't mean it always has to be around. You can create one that only lasts a few weeks and then delete it. You could be really, efficient about keeping those in style, but definitely keep the main ones around that reflect your major purchasing decisions or your, your personas that you create on site, and then utilize that tactic. And especially if you're promoting a new page or putting content live, you should always have some kind of personalization strategy to those big groups that you created to help push. So, my basic suggestion is start big, come up with the general ones, learn the ropes and kind of figure out what to do. And then from there, start building up as your criteria breaks out. All right, so a few other questions that we have are success metrics that we can cover or that we can give back. And I think Chris looked a little bit at the dashboard, and Chris, you can pull it up on your screen, the dashboard for Advanced. When we're talking about content suggestions or recommendations, really the conversion is what we're going towards. And I know conversion is always a relative term. Think of a conversion in your case as a user who reached a page that we wanted them to reach. Now, if that conversion included signing up for an email address or signing up for a newsletter or something like that, then that conversion becomes the end of that. But if we're out of a commerce space where we're not selling widgets or trying to sell shoes, our conversion becomes a little different. And many times that conversion could just be getting to a marketing page or getting to a landing page. It really depends on what your KPI is. And so in this tool, we can really show which content was used in the right way. We're comparing it against bounce rates, which is big. We want to know who ditches the site if they see the content or how long we get them to stay. And then you can relate this all back to what's important to you. Is it the number of people signing up for your newsletter? Is it the membership confirmations that you're doing in order to create it? And this data can really be rich, and it can be backed up by now starting to understand the profile or what a user looks like who does that particular conversion and drives them through. Now, I think taking that success metric and converting it into an ROI standard, you really have to start looking at your system and what the value of your website is to your company. So if we're looking at content recommendations and the immediate values would get people to stay on longer, stay on the site longer, drive them to more conversions, the ROI is going to be to generate more memberships, to generate more event confirmations. If we can build a correlation between looking at more content, spending more content, or seeing more content and converting more, the ROI for the tool can be conversions. Now, our data tool, our insight tool, it's a little bit different. And I think the ROI on that is more about the actionability that you take as an organization. And if we can create more efficient groups and help increase conversion, then the data that we're collecting about your users helps create more revenue. But it is kind of an A to B to C instead of an A to B point. So I would value that tool more in marketing intel, and really the intel that we need as an organization to make proper decisions, and an investment in resources to say we need to be smarter. And the question we get here is, what is really the main difference between this kind of intel and Google Analytics? What's the difference? What's the main point? And if I could tell you that I could get event level information and break down event level to understand what users clicked on by user, by session, by anonymous user, and break it down, where analytics is, or Google Analytics is really good about site trends, to be able to give you that individual session understanding, that breakdown. I can give you so much more rich information, and the ability to visualize that, the ability to take action on it back to the organization and back to the tool, it is going to be incredibly rich. Now, Google Analytics can do some of that. It requires a lot of development and a lot of customization. We're providing you a tool out of the box, and especially utilizing the fact that you're an Episerver user really helps you understand that and really push the bigger piece. All right, let me look through and see if we have any more questions. Oh, okay, one last question. The typical length of time for setup on some of these tools. Visitor groups really depends on how deep you want to get into visitor groups. Adage does a fantastic job helping with the data collection and even strategy on pieces like that. I would go through that and start to understand the bigger piece, and it just depends on how many you'd like to create. Advanced, Adage does a really good program and experience using our personalization tools. It's typically about a month setup between testing and actionability and data collection before the data gets really rich enough to start to put into place. But then it's just like any other block that you would deliver on the site, and we back you up by a really strong expert services team who has experience in using these products. So really drive that home. The final one would be Insight, data collection tool. Really depends on how many data points you'd like to collect and how many different pieces we're bringing in through the API. And so, I'll say on time to set up there, really ask yourself, how diverse is our data set? How many pre-done connectors we have? We're working with Adage to start making Testatura a more convenient or more consistent interaction with Insight to help save you guys a lot of time and effort on that. But even with Insight, I would give that, about a month of time just to work through getting the data right, testing the data, making sure you're collecting it in the right space, and really executing it. So, these tools are short to midterm time investments, especially the add-ons, but they bring incredible value. And I hope, as part of this, you've seen some easy wins, which we're always trying to look for, and things that you could say, hey, with a little investment, we can really add a lot of value here. We can use machine learning, we can use this data insights to really drive our marketing organization to the next level.